Hi, and welcome to Coffee with the Chairman, where we speak to the incredibly talented Canadian and Canadian alumni community here in the UAE and speak to its members to get their point of view and their outlook. Today, I'm joined by Taufiq Rahim, the Executive Director of GlobeSite. Hi, Taufiq, how are you?
Good to see you.
Thank you very much for joining us. So, I know that GlobeSite focuses a lot on development, particularly aligned with the UN's Millennium Development Goals. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, what got you into this business, and what GlobeSite does?
Sure. So definitely we're focused on the Sustainable Development Goals, the successor to the Millennium Development Goals, where the world is trying to achieve essentially a new standard of living for all by 2030. I bring together a background in strategy, development, and the social sector. And that's really the impetus for building GlobeSite. And here from Dubai and now around the world, where we can connect the global East and South into the conversations that are predominantly, being held in the West.
Right.
We want to kind of reshape how those partnerships and strategies are being undertaken.
That's fascinating. So, you have a background in strategy.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that drove you into this line of work at this point in time? Obviously, there's been never more need for this type of work given the situation that we're in at the moment. What drove you into it, Taufiq?
Well, I think it's the moment, Ruda. We are at a time where, while we've had tremendous progress around the world, and we've seen that even here in Dubai, we also have unparalleled levels of inequality.
Correct.
And we have a true divergence between the global East and South kind of emerging, right? As we see this epochal shift economically. And so we need to have new ways of thinking if we're going to find ways to advance solutions to some of the largest challenges that face us. Obviously, we're in the midst of one,
of course,
with the pandemic, but we've seen that with the humanitarian situation across the Middle East. And in the future, obviously, we're going to have to deal very assertively with climate change. So, all of these bring together a moment, and which is one of the reasons why we're driving the work that we do at GlobeSite.
Fantastic. So, one of your most recent reports is on 2030 and the efforts to bring and the goals that need to be associated with achieving our goals for 2030.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit about your work in this regard?
Sure. We work significantly behind the scenes with some of the largest philanthropic and international organizations in the world. But with that connectivity, we have really an ability to reshape and reframe the conversation. And that's why we're launching 2030 dot solutions this year around the time of the UN General Assembly in September to really put more thinking out there that challenges the prevailing thinking around some of the challenges that you see around the Sustainable Development Goals that you mentioned.
Interesting.
How can we do things differently, leveraging some of the talent, resources that exist out there today?
That's fascinating. So, of course, one of the challenges that we have when we talk about sustainable development is the sort of leapfrogging issue for developing for the global East, as you say, right? I mean, you can't. The global East cannot progress into its development path in the same way that the West did, because that would then result in a climate catastrophe. What do you think are the major challenges? Do people accept that logic, or is that logic still relatively far away from from the leaders of countries who think that the West did it, so then we have to go through it as well?
Right. I mean, I don't think we're going to see any type of halt to the way India, for example, develops, or even now large parts of Africa are developing. They're going to need to deliver for the livelihoods of their people.
Correct.
And so we're going to need to have kind of a tripartite focus. One is that you have indigenous voices as part of the conversation. The second is collaboration across the private, public, and social sectors.
Okay.
So when we see this leapfrogging, if you've seen it in other countries historically, whether it's Singapore, etc., it's not just an NGO coming in. It's actually the private sector that's very much at the forefront of this. So we need to make sure we have an inclusive conversation that brings that collaboration. And then finally, I think there's real trade-offs to be made,
Right.
And that's the discussion that we need to have openly because, everything has a concurrent result, when you're going in one direction, something else can happen in another.
And how would you rate Canada's participation in this realm?
I think Canada needs to do better. I think we're really great at being Canada in Canada.
Okay.
And despite having such a significant and great diaspora community, especially here in Dubai, and the great work that the Canadian Business Council does in bringing that together, I think we have to find more ways to plug those voices into the conversation back home.
Correct.
For a more creative and innovative foreign policy and trade effort abroad.
I think you're on exactly the right path, Taufiq. I mean, I agree with you. The diaspora is massive, and I think that the way in which the diaspora, we as Canadians living abroad, plug into the mothership in Canada, is I think often overlooked. What do you think are the major milestones that you're looking forward to over 2021? What do you think in this line of work will be the determining factor of whether we're moving in the positive way towards 2030 or in a negative way towards 2030?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think the prevailing consensus is going to be to turn to places like the World Economic Forum, etc., to set agendas. And we'll see these videos coming out around, the climate solution, etc. I think what I'm going to look for is, say, do we have really organic institutions and voices from what I mentioned, the global East and South, actually out there in the forefront and shaping the agenda, as well as Western institutions listening to that agenda.
Right.
And I don't think it's any more a matter of choice, because the way the world and the power structures and the economics are constructed today, you need to have that listening and you need to have that meeting ground, because otherwise you might make a decision, let's say in Canada or in Europe, but it's not going to be implemented globally, right? And we see the forces shaping the economy here in Dubai. It's not just coming from one direction.
Of course not.
We see it from all sides.
And that's fascinating. So of course, you have there's a lot of complexity there.
Yes.
When you're talking about building a broader civic society,
Yeah.
in addition to building the NGO scene as
Yeah.
well as the private sector.
Yeah.
Are there any countries that you've worked in so far that the UAE accepted that really say, look, this is the model and it's reaping benefits here in this country? Which governments got it right? Which civic societies got it right?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I don't think there's one size solution. We look at Bangladesh, where you've had tremendous economic growth, unparalleled in some respects over the last decade, and there's actually significant opportunity in there. We've seen an advance in livelihoods of a great number of people. But there are challenges to the civil society development.
Got it.
You'll see kind of similar economic development in India, but then you have to say, is it inclusive growth?
Correct.
I think, a lot of these countries would benefit from actually more conversations with each other to see where they can learn from. Because I don't think there's one model that's working. It's kind of bits of models that are working in different places. And obviously people go back to, the Asian tigers in Singapore and South Korea and Taiwan, as the benchmarks. And they might still be in terms of the ones that really made this comprehensive leap over the last 20, 30 years.
It's interesting you say that, because when people think back to Asian success stories and from a development perspective, they do think about Taiwan and Singapore, but they forget about Indonesia, which was also one of the Asian tigers. And in Indonesia in the 90s, you saw a lot of the challenges with big, complicated Asian countries trying to, as I said, leapfrog over. It's incredible that this is the world in which you're living, in which you're working, and kudos to you, Taufiq, for moving the world forward in this regard. We, the CBC, are here to support you 100%. So let us know what we can do, and your point about the Canadian diaspora is well taken. We're here to push that agenda forward.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, Taufiq.